Now that is the first round of the 2022 NAB AFL draft completed. It's time now to recap it. We want the winners. There's no losers. The surprises and what is in store, of course, for night 2, because it is the Giants that hold the first pick of night 2. That's pick 22. But Cal, let's recap what has happened so far. And it all started, of course, with Aaron Cadman and the Giants taking him with pick number 1.
Yeah, that's right. There was no surprises in the top 10. Everyone read that on Saturday night. Aaron Cadman at pick 1, as we probably thought it was going to be the case. The bid came for Will Ashcroft clearly at pick 2. Harry Sheezel, George Wardlaw, they've been zeroed in on those two for a long time. The half-forward who's a gun in front of goal, and Wardlaw, the midfielder. This was the big pick. This was the big pick. The Bombers had big offers for it. Yeah, I mean, I had a thought that, you know, Elijah Sardis, given his dominance across this year when he played, sometimes you go back to what the course of the year is told, and he's always been ranked around that part of the draft for a lot of clubs. A lot of clubs had him there, so I think that pick made a lot of sense. And in the end, if it's that even as well, if it's a 51 v 49 split, the local factor would have to come into the decision-making too. He's from the Oakleigh Chargers. They bring him in. Point of difference to their midfield. Don't worry about that. Bailey Humphrey, obviously, just on the Bombers pick, the Demons were trying to get up to that pick. So had the Bulldogs had some interest. The Gold Coast had considered jumping one to make sure they could get Bailey Humphrey. In the end, they could stay and grab him there, and they did, because he's a gun and he'll be really good for them. Cam Mackenzie at the Hawks. That was a big selection too, Riley, because we weren't sure which way they were going to go between Mackenzie, Clark, Jimby, even Phillippo there.
Talk to us about the next phase of the draft, Cal, because we know straight after that is what we were calling phase 2 the whole way through.
Yeah.
We didn't know what would happen, but the Blues sort of shaped it in many ways, because they could have taken Ed Allen, who, as we can see there, slipped down to Collingwood at 19. But then we kind of saw our first sort of surprises. For those of us that follow the draft through your Phantom, I mean, pick 14 was obviously the first real shock in the sense that West Coast took Elijah Hewitt, who of course was an option for them throughout the year, but then we knew that what they did there would mix up the order a little bit further on.
Yeah, it was bid city in the second half of the second half of the first round. So Jasper Fletcher, the bid came for him from from the Bulldogs. They matched that, the Lions. Then the bid came from the Swans for Harry Rouston. Then the Swans from Max Michelini as well. So 3 in that group.
And then they traded it.
Then they traded it out. So the Swans got out of there. The Hawks came up and picked Josh Wettle. But you're right, Riley. Surprising, probably with Elijah Hewitt ahead of Ed Allen. That was the choice of the locals, and also the choice of Matt Jefferson too for the Eagles, who was in the mix for that selection. The D's will be wrapped to get Matt Jefferson there. I think it's a really good pick to bring in a key forward into their club and into their mix. They didn't have to move up. They had some interest prior to the draft in trading up to make sure they could get him. In the end, they stuck fat and were able to get him at that point. Ed Allen got through a little bit later than I thought he would. And as soon as he got to the Pies, we thought that was probably too good an opportunity for them to pass up, given that he got to that part of the draft and his stark improvement across the second half of the year. And then Jacob Constanti, the Swans finally made a pick. A couple of bids, did their trade, and then took some time to make the pick and grab Jacob Constanti. And then the final pick off night 1 was Darcy Jones, who was probably viewed around this part of the draft. The Giants had shown a fair bit of interest in him, a smaller type, but a point of difference as well to what they've got, can play in all 3/3 of the ground, and certainly an exciting player and good character as well.
I mean, Cal, before the draft started, we talked about the Giants and how crucial it was for them to, I guess, nail their picks, because they had so many in the first round. I know the Harry Rouston bid from Sydney threw a spanner in the works for them. How do you rate what they've done, though, in terms of what is now on their list?
Well, it's definitely come earlier than they would have hoped. That wasn't the plan coming into tonight, to have to match the bid with your second selection. But they did it. They still want the player. They grabbed him. They had the opportunity not to take him. If they didn't want him and they rated other players on the board, they wouldn't have had to take him. So they clearly viewed him as that around that part of the draft. Does it change their view heading into tomorrow? That's the really interesting part for me now. They've got the first pick of tomorrow. They'll field calls and offers and a magnitude of interest in that next selection. But because of that bid, does that change how they essentially look at their overall haul? Because they get the key forward at number 1 in Cadman, they get Harry Rouston, the midfielder, to bring into that group, and they get Darcy Jones as a small. Do they take the next pick, or do they trade it and sell it and spend the next 24 hours listening to calls?
Well, let's say they take it. Who are the players that are on the board still? Who are the players that you think will be the first ones taken on the second?
Well, not necessarily even if they take it. I think these are the guys that are going to be the clubs that the players that clubs come and
Yes.
try and
Yeah.
get too. Harry Barnett is a player that I think will be on the radar of a lot of clubs, trying to get up and see if they can grab him. I think Braden George is a player who some clubs might try to push up the order to get. I feel like clubs in the early or mid-20s part of the draft now should be starting to think about moving up a few spots for the cost of a future second to try and grab him. And that's been the case or price in the past to move up those few spots on night 2. So there are a couple. I think Lockie Cowan's another one. I think Jacob Ryan is both rebounding halfbacks will be in that mix. Charlie Clark is another one as well. So they're the group that I feel like will be there tomorrow. And my voice is going. I'm not sure my voice will be there tomorrow, but I think they'll be there in the early part of the draft tomorrow.